Ciao, I'm Mary Ann Esposito. Today on Ciao Italia, East meets West. How many ways can you say ravioli? Well, there are many ways to say it. And today, the word for ravioli is tortelli, because we are going to make a Tuscan version of a ravioli that really is a very old recipe. It goes back to the 1400s. And the first indication of the tortelli di patate mugellina was in a poem written by Lorenzo de' Medici. Can you believe it? So we want to start with some potatoes, because tortelli di patate mugellina means tortelli or ravioli filled with potatoes in the style of the Mugello, which is a northern area of Tuscany. So here we have some Yukon Gold potatoes. You want 4 large potatoes, and you want to just mash them up after you either boil them, bake them, or microwave them. And I like to microwave them because that way I don't get any additional water in the potato, and the potato stays fairly dry, as you can see. So we're going to give this just a little bit of olive oil, a couple tablespoons. This is going to become our filling. So you make the filling first. So the olive oil, the potatoes, a little bit of salt. And then you set this aside because now you want to flavor this with some garlic and parsley. So I'm just going to set that aside and get some garlic. So a clove of garlic, if it's a small clove, use 2. If you like garlic, you can add more. But when you buy garlic, you buy it in a knob like this. And the trick to getting good garlic is to look at the bulb and to make sure there's no cracks, no openings there. This isn't open. The bottom isn't dried out and has like a yellow cast around it. Then you know you have a good garlic, and it feels solid in your hand. So that's a little tip about garlic. So here we have our garlic. We're just going to mince that up a little bit. Now this recipe that I'm going to do for you today, the tortelli di patata mugellina, has an old history, because this was the kind of recipe where country folk would use scraps of dough, whatever they had, and they would fill it with very humble ingredients, like potatoes. But the original recipes didn't have potatoes, they had chestnuts, because the Mugello area of Tuscany, that northern area, was an area where a lot of chestnut trees grew. So chestnuts became the first filling. And then after the chestnut trees kind of went by the wayside, potatoes took their place. So this is kind of a really humble dish. So we're going to put the garlic in here. And now with that, we need some parsley. So here we have some parsley. You want about 1/4 cup, I would say, flat leaf parsley. And use fresh, don't use dried, so it won't have any flavor. And you mince that. And this is all that's going to be in the filling, as I say. It's a very old dish, so it doesn't have a lot of highfalutin ingredients in it. It's very, very simple what the ingredients are for the filling. So we're just going to blend this together in a little saute pan and get that garlic and parsley soft before we add it to the potatoes. Okay, so that's going right with the garlic. And now we want to get some oil going in a little saute pan. So we have a little olive oil in the pan here, a couple tablespoons will do it. Add the garlic and the parsley, and just get it soft. Then you want to let that cool down a little bit before you add it to the potato mixture. So this goes in here. Smells good already. And now we just want to mix that around. And this you do ahead of time. Before you make the pasta, you want to get the potatoes mixed. And you see how dry these potatoes are in the bowl. And that's because we microwave them. So then we're going to add a grinding of nutmeg. A good grinding. And some grated Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. About 1/4 cup goes in. Mix that all around and then just set this aside. And you can see that this is going to be a perfect filling for the tortelli because it's going to stay where you put it. It's not loose and runny. All right. Now it's time to make the pasta. So we have 4 eggs that we're whirling up in the food processor because we're going to make the dough in a food processor. How large should the egg be? It's all very relative. I would say start with large eggs, but large eggs, as I say, that could be relative depending on where you buy them. So it's all in the amount of flour that you're going to be adding to those eggs. So once they are whirled up, you want to give that a pinch of sale, a little bit of salt. And then we want to add the flour in increments. So for 4 eggs, a general rule, but by no means is it a commandment, you would probably use about 2, 2.5 to 2 3/4 cups of flour. So I'm just eyeballing this right now. Let's see what we've got. Okay, and we keep adding until we have a dough. Now I may need to add more flour. I might need to add a little bit of water or olive oil. Just don't know. This is a recipe that you have to do trial and error. Okay, now we're getting there, but it's still not right because I know that that's just too soupy. See, a little too tacky. So what you don't want to do is overflour this. This may be just the right amount. Okay, let's check it again. Perfect. All right, so we can take that out. And when you do, take it out onto a little floured board. Careful of the blade. If you don't have a food processor, you're doing this by hand. But you can see that that is just the right amount of flour. It's not too hard, it's not too soft. It's the Goldilocks effect, as I'm always saying. So you want to knead it a couple times on a board. And then you're going to have to let this dough rest for about 30 minutes because you want to relax the gluten. So you cover it with a bowl and you let it rest. Here's one that I made this morning. And now you can see the difference in color between these two. This is a relaxed dough. This is not a relaxed dough because you see how that springs back to me? But when I do that, those indentations just stay there. So we are good to go. All right, so now that we have our relaxed dough, we want to work in small increments, but first I have to get my pasta machine. So I'm going to lop off a little piece here. This is going to be enough dough to make at least 4 or 5 dozen, depending how large or small you make them. So then you want to flatten that dough with a rolling pin. And then we're going to run this through our pasta machine. And we're going to thin this down so that we can use it, fill it with the potato filling. So let's start here on the widest setting. and really thin this dough down. You see, it's nice and pliable. It's not tacky. It doesn't need any flour at this point. Now we don't want to make the dough too thin because it's going to be filled. If we make it too thin, then we run the risk of the filling falling through the dough. So we don't want that to happen. And then it would open up in the water while you were boiling them, and oh, you would have a mess on your hands, and you would say, why did I make these tortelli di patate mugellini? I could have just gone to the store. And this will be the final pass-through. This is thin enough now. Every pasta machine is different, so your settings might be different on your pasta machine. I would not go to the last setting with this. All right, so here's our long sheet. So what I'm going to do is, you can do this several ways. I'll show you two ways. So I'm going to cut this sheet in half. And just set this one aside for a second. And here is our ravioli, or our tortelli sheet. Here is our potato mixture, see, that we made. So you want to take a little bit of that, and then starting kind of away from the edge, don't put too much in there because that could just seep out. Leave a little space between them, like about an inch or so. You get the whole family involved in doing this. You see, these potatoes are so dry that you could actually do them ahead, roll them in, if you're really anal, roll them into little balls and then just put them on your dough like that. So then you want to take one end of that dough and just roll it over. See? Put your hand there. Everyone's going to know that these are handmade, because no two are going to be alike. So once you do that, you can cut them. Okay? And what do you do with these scraps? You re-roll. See? And here are your little plump pillows, because that's what tortelli are really. They're little plump pillows that you have handmade. And oh boy, whoever comes to your house for dinner is really going to be impressed. So then you gather up those scraps and you re-roll. The other thing you could do with this is you could put this over a ravioli form. You put it over a ravioli form, then you just have to roll over it with a rolling pin. Or you can cut it in half down the center. Like so. And then we'll neaten that up in a second. And then do the same thing. Instead of folding over, take the dough, or the filling rather, and space them again. Okay. And then just put the other half of the sheet over the top, and then roll. And it doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to go and press. So you got to press all the way around now. Okay. All the way around. Really press down. And then you neaten it off. I love my little pasta wheel. It's perfect for this kind of thing. So then you get your ravioli again, or your tortelli in this case, which is a ravioli. And you keep making these until you have a whole pile of them, and then you can cook them. And for this type of a tortelli, we're just going to use a very simple butter sauce with this. Take those little edges off. And they're very country looking. They're very, very simple. And you want to make sure that those are really, really sealed. So that's 2 ways of doing them if you don't want to use a ravioli form. So now we're ready to cook them. The sauce for the tortelli di patate mugellini is simply a butter and sage sauce. So this is fresh sage. Don't do this with dried sage. It will not be the same, because when you rub your hands on any kind of fresh herb, it just gets that wonderful flavor and smell. And this is a very woodsy kind of flavor. So we've melted 2 sticks of butter, unsalted, in a saute pan or a saucepan, and then chopped up about 1/3 cup of the sage. And all you really want to do, I'm going to give that a little bit of salt too, because the butter is unsalted. And all you really want to do is let that sage seep with the butter until you're ready to cook the tortelli, because then the sage will really flavor this. This is almost in the tradition of like a nudie sauce. In other words, there's not a lot of color to it. So now that we have the sauce, we can cook the tortelli di patate mugellini. The water is ready. So now we can cook. We want to add some salt, of course, to the water. Boiling water. And because the tortelli are fragile, we're not just going to dump them in the water. So take a few at a time and just put them in my little scoop here, and then you can use the same scoop to take them out. So be gentle with them. And if you've sealed them correctly, they are not going to open. And if 1 or 2 does, well, chalk it up to, the next time you'll do it better. So there they are. I would cook like a dozen or so at a time. And they're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes. They're going to bob for a while. You don't want to overcook them. So I can put a few more in. Okay, and now we wait. All right, they've all come to the top. None of them have opened, which is a good sign, meaning that we sealed them. So you want to be careful with them now. Get all that excess water off. See? Look at how beautiful they are, these little pillows. I think Lorenzo de' Medici would love these. And we're going to put them right there in the butter sauce. See? Now, these are always a first course. And I'm always amazed that when I'm researching recipes like this, it's always something like, this is a real peasant dish. But to me, this is super elegant. And here are the rest of them. There they are. And now we want to mix them gently with the sauce. That's why you want to use a flat dish like this to do it, so that you don't destroy their beauty. Oh, they smell fantastic with the sage, very woodsy, beautiful. All right, there they are, beautiful. Look at that, such a simple sauce. And then, usually about 6 to 8 is a serving, but if you want to have more, you are perfectly entitled to do that. Get that one, because this plate's for you. I'll give you an extra one. Look at how gorgeous those are. And then all we really need to do is give this a sprinkling of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. And that's how you do tortelli di patate mugellini. Now here's another version of how you can do, these are not the tortelli di patate mugellini, but this is an idea for you if you're just rushed for time, you would like to make a ravioli type dinner, you don't want to make dough. Well, go to the store and buy yourself some egg roll wrappers, because this can be your dough. And here we have a filling of spinach and potatoes, a little bit of nutmeg, salt, and pepper. We're ready to go. And you see it's dry just like the other potato mixture was, except this one has spinach. So how does this go? Well, you have your wrappers, and you have to keep them moist. They dry out very, very quickly. So I take some of this, and these I usually make bigger than I do the tortelli. So you put a wad of that on one half. Let me turn that around for you. And then you just fold it over, but you have to give that a little bit of egg white on the edges, or you could use water if you want, because you really want this to stick. So then you just press it, see, push down on that filling a little bit. Now, you can either leave them like that, in which case they are now a ravioloni, because they're huge, they're big. And you can trim the edges if you want to make them a little prettier. See, like that. Again, you want to make sure that that edge is really, really sealed. And look at that. I mean, I've seen those in Italian restaurants when I'm in Italy where, you know, they're just serving you 2 of those as a serving. So let me do another one. Make sure you wipe those edges with the egg white or water. Again, take a good couple tablespoons or so, stick it right there. Bring one end over. I call this East meets West because I'm using the egg roll wrappers instead of making pasta. But this is a great idea for somebody who just, you know, just don't want to make pasta, but you want to have something nice like this. You can just use these wrappers. And what do you do with these little pieces that you're trimming off? Well, they can go in soup. So nothing is wasted. So there's another one. Press down on the filling. Okay. And a sauce for these, well, we're just going to do a very simple sauce of melted butter and Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. Let's do one more. So brush the edges. Get a couple hefty tablespoons. Put it in the center. You see how dry that filling is, which is really good. Fold over. Press down on the filling. Press the edges really well. You can either leave it like that or trim it off with your taglia pasta, your pasta wheel. Okay, those are good to go in the water. That same water that we use to do the tortelli di patate mugellina, we're going to use to cook the East meets West. Look at how beautiful they are. So I'm going to put them in. I'm not going to add more salt because there's already salt in the water. So gently put them in. And again, you're going to bring them to a boil and let them cook just until they're tender. And then we're going to take them out and put them into a butter and Parmigiano Reggiano cheese sauce. If you love making pasta, you'll love making these 2 dishes. Today we started with tortelli di patate mugellina, and I took my inspiration from an antique recipe that comes from Mugello in northern Tuscany. And here we have ravioli that are stuffed with potato, a little bit of nutmeg, cheese, and swimming in a sauce of butter, Parmigiano Reggiano, and sage. Delicious. And if you haven't got time to make pasta, why don't you do this? This is my inspiration for East meets West. Get yourself some egg rolls. Make a filling of potatoes and spinach and nutmeg, a little bit of cheese. Fill your egg roll wrappers. Bingo, you're done. Add a little sauce of butter and Parmigiano, and you've got a treat on your hands. East meets West. And until I see you nella cucina again, I'm Mary Ann Esposito. Ciao.